This program is supported by Bank of Commerce, an affiliate of San Miguel Corporation. We think customers.
Hello, I'm Alma Angeles, and you're watching Eagle News International.
And I'm CJ Hero. Welcome to the program. On tonight's headlines.
The death toll after the collapse of a Florida apartment tower rose to 11, with more than 150 people still missing and their weary families waiting nearly 4 days for information as to their fate.
We're open a new part to try.
Queensland Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk announces a 3-day lockdown for Brisbane, making it the 4th major Australian city ordered into lockdown as the country battles an outbreak of COVID-19.
President Duterte dared Senator Manny Pacquiao to name corrupt agencies and officials, or else he will campaign against the country's boxing superstar in the 2022 elections.
Schools and COVID-19 vaccination centers closed Monday, while community cooling centers opened as Western Canada and parts of the Western United States baked in an unprecedented heat wave that broke several temperature records.
The death toll after the collapse of a Florida apartment tower rose to 11, with more than 150 people still missing and their weary families waiting nearly 4 days for information as to their fate. 4 new bodies and other human remains were found after rescuers dug an enormous trench, 125 feet long, 20 feet wide, and 40 feet deep through the mountain of debris, according to the Miami-Dade County Mayor. Take a look.
Search and rescue continues all day long, and our teams have made significant progress on the site. Over the past few hours, our first responders did recover another victim. So, in total, the number of people accounted for now stands at 136, with 150 unaccounted for. The number of confirmed deaths is 11. Tragically, 11.
We have the potential for having void spaces. We have these pockets that could potentially be in the rubble where we can find live victims. If we just jump on this pile and just attack it, we will collapse these void spaces and there will no longer be an opportunity to find a live victim. We have found 9 victims and we are finding human remains within the rubble. We want to find the live people. It's what we want. But we understand that this is a lot of what we're going to find is going to be human remains, and we're going to find victims.
We are going in intervals when they breach or open a new part to try to smell and sniff for anything that is living.
There's people, there's families that have come here and they've told me, I am not going to give up hope because it's happened before. I've seen it happen in this country, in this country, in that country. And I ask myself, why can't it happen here? Why can't it happen when we have the best rescue team in the entire world? Why can't it happen here? Listen, I have hope. This is the wall of hope. This community has hope. This is just
Now, the outlook grew increasingly grim by the hour. However, as the slow rescue operation involving workers sorting nonstop through the rubble in torrid heat and high humidity carried on, Israeli and Mexican engineers and search and rescue specialists have joined an army of American workers at the site. The 12-story oceanfront Champlain Tower South pancaked in the middle of the night on Thursday as residents slept. At least 18 Latin American nationals are among the missing, including Uruguayans, Argentines, and Paraguayans. Canada has also said at least 4 of its citizens may be affected, without elaborating. Meanwhile, a Filipina is among 159 persons still missing. The relatives of a 70-year-old Filipina, Maricoy Obias Bonifoy, and her 85-year-old husband, Claudio Bonifoy, residing in Unit 11 or 1001 on the 10th floor of the Surfside building that collapsed. Claudio Bonifoy is an uncle of the former Chilean President Michelle Bachelet. Now, their nephew, at Jonathan Slanch, posted a call for information on his missing aunt and uncle on Twitter, which has garnered more than 800 retweets. Anger was fanned by News Friday that an engineer survey of the building in 2018 had pointed to major structural damage to a concrete slab beneath a ground-level pool deck, as well as abundant damage inside the parking garage. Authorities have stressed that the reason for the collapse could take months to determine.
In other news, President Duterte dared Senator Manny Pacquiao to name corrupt agencies and officials, or else he will campaign against the country's boxing superstar in the 2022 elections. Duterte promised to fight corruption as well as illegal drugs and criminality when he ran and won by 6 million votes in the 2016 presidential election. In the 2022 elections, many have been persuading the country's first leader from Mindanao to run for vice president, which he said would be dependent on the presidential candidate he will support. Take a look.
Do that. Meron ako dito dinagdag running for vice president ako. Sabi ko, it's not at all a bad idea. And if there is a space for me there, siguro. Pero kung wala akong space, everybody is crowding up, wanting to be one vice president, sila na lang muna kasi tapos na ako. Kasi kung mag-vice president ako, din kalaban ko kontrapartido, kaya ni Pacquiao, salita ng salita na 3 times daw tayo mas corrupt. So I am challenging him, ituro mong opisina na corrupt. At ako na ang bahala, within 1 week may gawain ako. Maglista ka, Pacquiao, at sinasabi mong 2 times kami corrupt. Ilista mo yung mga tao at opisina at dapat nilista mo na yun at ibigay mo sa akin. Di ba ang sabi ko noon, if you come to know that there is a corruption, let me know, give me the office and the... Ganon ang dapat ginawa mo. Wala ka namang sinabi noong all these years, puro ka praises ng praises sa akin. Tapos ngayon sabihin mo, corrupt. If you fail to do that, I will campaign against you because you are not doing your duty. Do it, because if not, I will just tell the people, do not vote for Pacquiao because he is a liar.
According to a report in Philippine Star, it is unclear where Pacquiao supposedly made the comments, but he is quoted making general statements about corruption in a December 2020 podcast interview on Nas Daily. I'm not saying that all of them are corrupt, he said. If they are affected by my words, I think they're guilty of corruption. That Pacquiao said, who has been a vocal supporter of the Duterte administration, said that in that interview. Now, both politicians belong to the PDP Laban party, with Duterte as party chairman and Pacquiao as president. Duterte said many government officials and employees have been charged before the Office of the Ombudsman and Sandigan Bayan due to corruption. He also said at least 73 immigration personnel have been removed due to his government's campaign against corruption.
In a related news, President Duterte was completely surprised about Senator Manny Pacquiao's claim that corruption exacerbates under his watch. That according to Malacanang. Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque said it was disappointing that Pacquiao was initially all praises for President Duterte's accomplishment and then later became a critic of the current administration just because the 2022 national and local elections are drawing near. Take a look.
Obvious that the relationship between the president and Senator Pacquiao is not as cordial as it was, no? And of course, the challenge for Senator Pacquiao was clear, no? In the past, you had nothing but praises for me. Puri ka lang ng puri sa akin. Di mo sa akin sinasabi, nakikita mong problema ng korupsyon. So, ayan, binigyan siya ata ng 1 linggo kung hindi ako nagkamali. Ilang araw ba yung binigay niya? Sabihin mo kasi niyang korupsyon. 1 week nga ang binigay sa kanya. No? Sabihin mo kasi may ahensyang korupsyon na yan dahil pag meron namang alam na actual kaso ng korupsyon, ina-action na naman po yan ng Presidente. And I can vouch for that dahil napakadami pong instances na korupsyon na pinadaan dito sa Office of the Presidential Spokesperson at meron po talagang nasibak, no? Sa lahat ng mga kasong natanggap kong personal. No? So ang hamon lang po ni Presidente, well, walk the talk, no? Kinakailangan kung may reklamo ka, sabihin mo kung anong reklamo niya na ma-actionan ng Presidente. Otherwise, talaga namumuliti ka lang daw si Senator Pacquiao. But I guess as far as your question is concerned, natapon na po ang sabaw, kumbaga. I don't think it was expected kasi ako mismo nagbalita sa taong bayan na nung minsan na linapitan ako ni Presidente na spokes, kailangan alam mo to, no? Ang gusto kong tumakbo talaga si Inday Sara pero ayaw talaga. So, kinakailangan mamili tayo who has the numbers between sa tatlo. Nang unang-unang sinabi niya, Senator Manny Pacquiao. Pangalawa, Isko Moreno. Pangatlo, former Senator Bongbong Marcos. So, actually, it was a complete surprise kasi hindi pa naman pre-preclude ng Presidente na pwede namang dati, no, na ma-endorso pa si Senator Pacquiao pero hindi ata nakaantay si Senator Pacquiao.
Now, Senator Pacquiao is the current president of the Partido Demokratiko Pilipino Lakas ng Bayan or PDP Laban, the ruling party that President Duterte chairs. Senator Pacquiao is among the personalities that the president considers as potential contenders for the 2022 presidential race, according to Malacanang. Secretary Roque said Duterte's strained ties with Senator Pacquiao would not be a reason for the president to remove Pacquiao as the possible standard bearer of his administration.
In other news, Queensland Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk announces a 3-day lockdown for Brisbane, making it the 4th major Australian city ordered into lockdown as the country battles an outbreak of COVID-19. The 3-day snap lockdown for Brisbane starting on Tuesday evening comes on top of similar orders imposed in Sydney, Perth and Darwin residents in recent days. Take a look.
Risk is real. And we need to act quickly, we need to go hard, we need to go fast. We've got to do this for 3 days, so there'll be a lockdown for 3 days. And I don't want it to be 30 days, so we just have to do this. So from 6 p.m. tonight until 6 p.m. on Friday, Southeast Queensland, Townsville City, Palm Island and Magnetic Island will go into lockdown.
Again, residents of Perth in Australia's west woke to a 4-day snap lockdown Tuesday morning, joining Sydney and Darwin residents, with the rules applying from midnight Monday into Tuesday and lasting a minimum of 4 days. Just 3 positive cases have been diagnosed in Perth since the outbreak was detected, but local health officials have long taken a highly cautious approach to any coronavirus clusters. Australia has been broadly successful in containing virus clusters, but is now battling flare-ups of the highly contagious Delta variant, which first emerged in India across the vast continent nation.
Under pressure over his government's response, Australia's Prime Minister Scott Morrison announced vaccines will become mandatory for aged care and quarantine hotel workers, while the AstraZeneca jab will be available to people aged under 60 who signed an indemnity form. Take a look.
The impact, particularly of the Delta variant. The Delta variant is proving to be a far more difficult element of this virus than we have seen to date. This is not just the case in Australia. It was certainly my experience when I was overseas that the Delta variant is presenting very different challenges from those that we have faced in the past, and that was a topic of some discussion at our meeting this evening. First, I would note is that we have agreed to mandate vaccination to have at least one dose by mid-September 2021 of all residential aged care workforce against COVID-19 as a condition of working in a residential aged care facility. Now, that will be implemented in a partnership between the Commonwealth and the states.
Almost 7.4 million vaccine doses have been administered to date, with less than 5% of adults reported to have received both jabs. Prime Minister Morrison acknowledged growing frustrations but placed the blame on disruptions caused to Australians' lives by the pandemic. Australia has recorded a total of just over 30,000 cases and 910 deaths in a population of about 25 million since the pandemic began. The largest current outbreak is in Sydney, where 150 people have tested positive for COVID-19 since a driver for an international flight crew was diagnosed in mid-June, with the city's residents now under stay-at-home orders for 2 weeks. A small cluster linked to an outback gold mine sent Darwin into lockdown after exposure sites were found for the first time in the city, which is home to a large indigenous population feared to be more vulnerable to COVID-19.
To Russia now, where on Tuesday the country recorded its highest daily death toll since the outbreak of the pandemic, as the country grapples with a spike in infections spurred by the highly contagious Delta variant. An official government tally reported 652 coronavirus fatalities over the past 24 hours, topping a record that was set in December last year. A record high number of daily deaths, 119, was also reported in Russia's second city, St. Petersburg, that is due to host a Euro 2020 quarterfinal on Friday. Some experts say that Russia vastly underreports coronavirus fatalities, counting only cases when COVID-19 was found to be the primary cause of death after autopsy. Nationwide infections grew by 20,616, bringing Russia's caseload to nearly 5.5 million, the fifth highest worldwide, according to an AFP tally. Over the past few weeks, St. Petersburg and the capital, Moscow, have been hit by a surge of infections, with authorities reintroducing virus restrictions. Moscow Mayor Sergei Sobyanin has said that the Delta variant, first identified in India, accounts for 90% of cases in the capital. To curb the spread of infections, the mayor ordered Moscow's businesses to send home 30% of non-vaccinated employees and restaurants to allow inside-only patrons who have been inoculated or infected in the past 6 months. Moscow also became the first Russian city to introduce mandatory vaccinations, requiring at least 60% of service industry workers to be fully inoculated by mid-August. Russia has seen at least 270,000 fatalities since the pandemic began.
And back here in the country, President Duterte extended the general community quarantine classification in the National Capital Region Plus, with Laguna and Cavite still under heightened restrictions until July 15. Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque said gyms, fitness centers at 40% capacity, and other indoor sports courts at 50% capacity will be allowed in Metro Manila, Rizal, and Bulacan. Let's listen in.
Para po sa mga lugar na mapapasailalim hanggang ng MECQ hanggang 15 July 2021, ang mga probinsya ng Cagayan, Apayao, Bataan, ang Lucena City, ang Puerto Princesa City, ang Naga City, ang Iloilo City at ang Iloilo Province, ang probinsya ng Negros Oriental, ang mga probinsya ng Zamboanga del Sur at Zamboanga del Norte, Cagayan de Oro City, ang buong Davao Region, kasama po ang Davao City, Davao Oriental, Davao Occidental, Davao de Oro, Davao del Sur at Davao del Norte, at ang Butuan City, Dinagat Island, Surigao del Sur. Ang mga lugar naman po na mapapasailalim under GCQ, ang NCR, Rizal at Bulacan ay meron pong kaunting restriction. Dalawa lang po yung restriction na yan. No? 40% pagdating sa mga gyms at 40% din po pagdating sa dine-in. Otherwise, parang ordinaryong GCQ na po yan. Ang mga probinsya ng Laguna at Cavite ay nasa ilalim po ng heightened restriction. Now, sa ilalim ng heightened restriction po, wala pong entertainment, walang recreational venues, walang amusement parks, walang traditional cockfighting, wala pong contact sports, walang indoor sports, walang indoor tourist attraction. 30% po ang allowed for services sa mga personal care services, kasama ang salons, parlors at beauty clinics. 30% po ang allowed sa outdoor tourist attraction. Allowed naman po ang staycation hotels, basta susunod po sa minimum public health standards, safety protocols, at saka wala rin po itong age restriction. 20% po ang kanilang indoor dining, pero kapag merong safety seal po pwedeng maging additional 10%, at sa outdoor dining ay 50%. No? Yung mga religious worship po, mga wake sa GCQ with heightened restrictions ay limitado po to 10%. Allowed po ang interzonal travel pero subject to destination LGU restrictions. No? Now, so, bukod pa po sa Laguna and Cavite, kasama rin po sa GCQ ang Baguio City, ang probinsya ng Ifugao, ang City of Santiago, ang probinsya ng Nueva Vizcaya, ang probinsya po ng Quirino, ang probinsya ng Batangas at ang Quezon Province, ang Guimaras, Aklan, Bacolod City, Negros Occidental, Antique at Capiz, ang Zamboanga Sibugay at ang City of Zamboanga, ang Iligan City, ang General Santos City, Sultan Kudarat, Sarangani, Cotabato and South Cotabato, at ang Agusan del Norte, Surigao del Norte, Agusan del Sur at ang Cotabato City. Now, lilinawin ko lang po na meron pong bagong rule. Kapag naka-MGCQ po, allowed na po ang recreational venues gaya ng net cafes, billiards, and arcades. Ito po ay sa lugar lamang na MGCQ.
In other news, Tokyo Medical Association holds a rehearsal at their pop-up virus testing venue in the Japanese capital's nightlife district, Kabukicho, where they hope the restaurant and bar employees and customers in the area take part in the antigen tests, encouraging safe dining and entertainment. Take a look.
抗原検査をスタートするきっかけになったのは何度も繰り返すその緊急事態宣言で飲食店の皆様方が非常に苦労なさってらっしゃる。で医師会としては今までとにかくもう自粛してください、飲みに行くのやめてくださいという話ばっかりでしたけども、それではやはりその経済も回りませんし。
The test run on Monday involved a demonstration of how participants can register themselves via smartphone before taking the antigen test, so that once they are confirmed negative, they will receive a photo pass indicating the negative result on their smartphone. The whole process takes around 20 minutes. Bars and restaurants in Tokyo are asked to shut by 8 p.m. as part of the measures to curb the spread of the coronavirus. According to a report from the NHK, a panel of experts advising the Tokyo metropolitan government has voiced concern about a possible resurgence of coronavirus cases in the capital, saying the situation could worsen quickly. Kako Mitsuo of Tohoku Medical and Pharmaceutical University heads that panel. Kako cited a rapid increase in the number of people out and about from 10 p.m. to midnight when the risk of infection is high. He said the speed is similar to that observed in the week after the lifting of the second state of emergency. The 2.5-month state of emergency was lifted in March. Kako also called for caution against the variant first detected in India, which has the L452R mutation. He said the variant shows signs of spreading and suggested that it could quickly become the dominant strain.
Meanwhile, Hong Kong is to ban all incoming flights from the United Kingdom from July 1st to curb the more infectious Delta strain of the coronavirus. The financial hub's government said in a statement today the UK would now be designated in the extremely high-risk category of countries, it added, the most severe rating the city has for pandemic travel. The latest measures over the Delta variant first found in India will restrict passengers who have stayed in the UK for more than 2 hours from boarding passenger flights to the city. The authorities said they upgraded the anti-pandemic measures in view of the recent rebound of the epidemic and the widespread Delta variant virus strain in Britain. The Hong Kong government added that the city also recorded a number of cases of the L452R virus strain, a mutation linked to Delta from people arriving from the United Kingdom. The city confirmed its first local case involving the Delta variant last week, ending a 16-day streak of 0 local cases. British authorities have said the Delta variant has become the dominant coronavirus strain on their territory.
Now, schools and COVID-19 vaccination centers closed Monday while community cooling centers opened as Western Canada and parts of the Western United States baked in an unprecedented heat wave that broke several records when it comes to temperature. Lytton in British Columbia broke the record for Canada's all-time high Monday with a temperature of 118 degrees Fahrenheit or about 47.9 degrees Celsius just one day after the village set the previous record at 116 degrees. Temperatures in the U.S. Pacific Northwest cities of Portland and Oregon and Seattle, Washington reached levels not seen since record-keeping began in the 1940s. 115 degrees in Portland and 108 in Seattle, according to the National Weather Service. The scorching heat has been blamed on a high-pressure ridge trapping warm air in the region. This heat dome poses serious health concerns, said Phillips, noting the last major heat wave in Canada left nearly 70 people dead in 2018. The extreme heat combined with intense drought created the perfect conditions for several fires to break out over the weekend, and one blaze on the California-Oregon border had already burned some 600 hectares or about 1,500 acres by Monday morning. Climate change is causing record-setting temperatures to become more frequent. Globally, the decade to 2019 was the hottest recorded, and the 5 hottest years have all occurred within the last 5 years.
In the related news, human service responders in Portland, Oregon's biggest city, tend to a vulnerable population suffering from one of the state's hottest heat waves on record. Take a look.
Well, our apartment doesn't have any air conditioning, so we came here because our cats were at risk for heat stroke. So
I live in a building and my air conditioners broke down, and it's over 100 degrees in my apartment right now, and I came to get some relief from the heat.
And in anticipation of the heat, late last week, our County Human Services team started to reach out to those we serve that are most vulnerable to check in and make sure that they had the resources they need. On Friday, around 1 p.m., we opened 3 cooling center locations throughout the county. At the cooling centers, we offer snacks, cold water, 3 meals a day, and a place to sleep for those who need it.
3 centers across Multnomah County opened last weekend to service over 350 people. Portland hit 114 degrees Fahrenheit on Monday, according to the U.S. National Weather Service, breaking back-to-back records set over the weekend. and forecasters are warning that more scorching weather is yet to come. In nearby Eugene, organizers were forced to postpone the final day of the U.S. Olympic track and field trials, moving afternoon events to the evening. On Sunday, meanwhile, Seattle, Washington State, the temperature hit 104 degrees Fahrenheit, a record that surprised residents not used to warmer climates.
The Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology today said a continued volcanic smog, or VOG, has been observed over the Taal volcano's caldera, as it also received reports of ill effects from residents around the area. If volcanic smog continues, the local government unit can temporarily evacuate severely exposed residents to safer areas, according to FIVOLC's director, Renato Solidum Jr. In an advisory, FIVOLC said reports of adverse effects came from residents of Lakeshore, Tanawan City and Talisay Municipality facing Taal Volcano Island, and from some workers of aquaculture in Taal Lake. Solidum said that most of those reported included throat irritation and difficulty in breathing. High levels of volcanic sulfur dioxide, or SO2, gas emissions and tall, steam-rich plumes have been observed from the Taal main crater since this past weekend, according to the advisory. With the continuous and unprecedented high SO2 degassing from Taal main crater, FIVOLC said it has recommended that health checks be conducted by local government officials on communities affected by VOG to assess the severity of SO2 impacts on their constituents. FIVOLC earlier advised those who have health conditions such as asthma, lung disease, and heart disease, as well as the elderly, pregnant women, and children to protect themselves against the ill effects of VOG. According to the United States Geological Survey, VOG poses a health hazard by aggravating pre-existing respiratory ailments.
A volcano in northwest Costa Rica erupted Monday, spewing an enormous column of smoke into the air in what could be its biggest outburst in years, according to authorities. The Rincon de la Vieja volcano's nearly 3-minute eruption in the early hours of a day belched a column of smoke almost 2 kilometers high, depositing ash on surrounding areas but causing no damage or injuries. The volcano, whose eruption didn't trigger any immediate evacuations, is situated in a national park in Guanacaste province, some 200 kilometers from the capital, San Jose. It was a pretty energetic eruption, according to Martin Demur, a specialist at the Volcanological and Seismological Observatory of Costa Rica. Although the volcano has frequent outbursts, he said some 1,400 last year alone. This could be the largest since the 1990s. The National Commission for Risk Prevention and Emergency Management said it had deployed a team to evaluate the situation and urge people not to approach that site. Costa Rica has 5 active volcanoes.
In other news, Poland's embattled Catholic Church on Monday revealed that since 2018, it has received several hundred new claims of sexual abuse of minors committed by clergy. The report comes as the politically influential church has been hit by a series of high-profile cases of abuse and cover-ups, until recently a taboo subject in the devout country. Take a look.
To, co się rzuca w oczy, przynajmniej mnie, obserwatorowi tych rzeczy, już od wielu lat, to jest fakt, że mamy w tej chwili od poprzedniej kwerendy na pewno mamy falę ujawnień. No, jeszcze jest dość duży potencjał, w cudzysłowie mówię potencjał ujawnienia. Czyli jest jeszcze z pewnością wiele przypadków ukrytych, które prawdopodobnie są zgłaszane dalej. I to nas
From July 2018 through the end of last year, the church received reports of 368 cases of sexual abuse, of which some occurred decades ago while others were recent. The Polish church found 39% of the claims to be substantiated, is still investigating just under 51%, and rejected 10% for reasons such as a lack of credibility. Half of the victims were under 15 years old, the age of consent in Poland. They were also divided evenly by gender. Some of the abuse lasted for more than a decade. The latest findings are a follow-up to a previous church report that nearly 400 of its clergy had sexually abused children and minors between 1990 and 2018. A long string of sexual abuse allegations have shaken Poland's church in recent years, especially following the release of the viral documentary Tell No One by journalist Tomasz Sekielski. Since last year, the Vatican has sanctioned 4 Polish bishops for covering up pedophilia by members of the clergy and announced the resignation of 2 others for cover-ups as well. The findings feature instances of abuse that took place between 1958 and last year.
In a historic ruling, South Africa's top court today handed the country's former president Jacob Zuma a 15-month jail term for contempt of court after he refused to appear before graft investigators. Zuma was told to turn himself in within 5 days. Take a look.
It is declared that Mr. Jacob Gedleyihlekisa Zuma is guilty of the crime of contempt of court for failure to comply with the order made by this court in Secretary of the Judicial Commission of Inquiry into allegations of state capture, corruption and fraud in the public sector. The majority judgment orders an unsuspended sentence of imprisonment for a period of 15 months. Mr. Jacob Gedleyihlekisa Zuma is ordered to submit himself to the South African Police at Nkandla Police Station or Johannesburg Central Police Station within 5 calendar days from the date of this order. In the event that Mr. Jacob Gedleyihlekisa Zuma does not submit himself to the South African Police Service as required by paragraph 5, the Minister of Police and the National Commissioner of the South African Police Service must, within 3 calendar days of the expiry of the period stipulated in paragraph 5, take all steps that are necessary and permissible in law to ensure that Mr. Jacob Gedleyihlekisa Zuma is delivered to a correctional center.
Now, most of the graft investigated by the commission involved 3 brothers from a wealthy Indian business family called the Guptas, who won lucrative government contracts and were allegedly even able to choose cabinet members. Zuma is separately facing 16 charges of fraud, graft, and racketeering relating to a 1999 purchase of fighter jets, patrol boats, and military gear from 5 European arms firms for 30 billion rand, then the equivalent of nearly $5 billion. At the time of the purchase, Zuma was president, Thabo Mbeki's deputy. He's accused of accepting bribes totaling 4 million rand from one of the firms, French defense giant Thales.
Ethiopia's government declared an immediate ceasefire today in the country's Tigray region. That area has seen 8 months of fighting between army and rebel forces, resulting in the world's worst famine crisis in a decade. A halt in violence will give humanitarian groups time to deliver aid to hundreds of thousands of people in need. The war in Tigray began last November when Prime Minister Abiy sent troops in to oust the dissident regional leadership. He said the move came in response to attacks by the regional ruling party, the Tigray People's Liberation Front, or TPLF, on federal army camps. Abiy promised a swift victory and federal troops took control of Mekelle in late November. But intense fighting has persisted throughout the region amid mounting reports of massacres and widespread sexual violence.
Also, a new report out yesterday from the UN Human Rights Chief is calling on the world to end systemic racism. The report focused on centuries of mistreatment of Africans and people of African descent. It also found high levels of racial profiling and excessive use of force by law enforcement in North America, Europe, and Latin America. Take a look.
Only approaches that tackle both the endemic shortcomings in law enforcement and address systemic racism and the legacies it is built on will do justice to the memory of George Floyd and so many others whose lives have been lost or irreparably damaged.
The George Floyd case, as I noted, is exceptional in that it's one in which someone has been convicted, and that obviously is something that was welcome in this instance, globally, I think. But the family, I think, said it most eloquently when they said that any sentence doesn't change the reality that they've been given a life sentence without their brother, father, friend, family member.
After George Floyd's death, the UN Human Rights was mandated in June last year to produce a comprehensive report on systemic racism, human rights violation by law enforcement agencies against Black people, and government responses to peaceful anti-racism process or protests. It also covered an accountability and redress for victims. The report's analysis was based on online consultations with more than 340 people, most of them Black.
A shooting in New York's bustling Times Square on Sunday injured a 21-year-old bystander, according to police, in the latest incident of gun violence in the Big Apple. The man was struck in the back by a stray bullet as he walked with his family past the Marriott Marquis Hotel on Broadway around 5:15 p.m. local time, a NYPD spokesperson told AFP. The spokesperson said he was the unintended target in a dispute between two males. The man, who local media said was visiting from upstate New York, was taken to hospital and is expected to survive. Police are investigating and no arrests have been made, he said. The incident comes after a shooting in Times Square in May injured a 4-year-old girl and 2 women. The suspect was later arrested in Florida. Sunday's gunfire comes as Broadway begins to reopen following the pandemic-induced shutdown that closed all theaters in March 2020. Shootings and crime in general have sharply increased in New York since the outbreak of the coronavirus, with public safety taking center stage during the recent mayoral campaign.
And the news continues here on Eagle News. We'll be right back.
This portion is brought to you by North Luzon Express Terminal.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Bank of Commerce. What we are is personal banking, where we understand that every deposit is your hard-earned money. Every loan is for good reason. Every service aids in your convenience. Every business of ours is meant to grow yours. We hear you, feel you, and we act on your every banking need. Bank of Commerce, an affiliate of San Miguel Corporation.
Fast Faster vaccination program rollout to address the high number of coronavirus infections, targeted containment measures, and sustained implementation of stimulus programs are expected to buoy the Philippine economy this year, according to Philippine economists. However, pandemic-related developments made ASEAN Plus 3 Macroeconomic Research Office, or AMRO, slash its 2021 growth forecast for the Philippines to 6.4% from 6.9%, and the 2022 projection to 6.8% from 7.9%. AMRO Chief Economist Dr. Ho Yee-Kor said in a virtual press briefing that for most countries in the region, including the Philippines, one of the priorities now is to roll out the vaccination as quickly as possible in order to contain the infection so they can open up the economy more fully and allow the economy to recover. He said fiscal support is critical, and fortunately in the case of the Philippines, we do see ample fiscal space. Based on the AMRO report on the country released during the day, the domestic economy continues to post improvements after registering its decades-low contraction of 16.9% in the second quarter of 2020.
Now, G20 ministers led by the United States said that the coronavirus pandemic showed the need for greater global cooperation as African nations sought help to develop their medical infrastructure. In a sharp reversal from the previous U.S. administration, Secretary of State Antony Blinken emphasized the need for multilateral institutions as foreign ministers from the group of 20 major economies met in the ancient Italian city of Matera. Multilateral cooperation will be key to our collective ability to stop this global health crisis, said Blinken, winding down a week-long trip to Europe. That's also true for the work we must do to strengthen global health security moving forward so we can detect, prevent, and respond better to future health emergencies. Blinken pointed to U.S. contributions to COVAX, the UN-backed initiative that aims to vaccinate low-income countries, including President Joe Biden's promise to provide 500 million Pfizer doses.
A U.S. judge dismissed the blockbuster antitrust lawsuit against Facebook filed last year by federal and state regulators, helping lift the value of the social media giant above $1 trillion for the first time. Judge James Boasberg of the U.S. District Court of Washington, D.C., dismissed the cases filed in December by the Federal Trade Commission and more than 40 states, which could have rolled back Facebook's acquisition of Instagram and the messaging platform WhatsApp. The judge said the federal lawsuit failed to plead enough facts to plausibly establish a necessary element, that Facebook has monopoly power in the market for personal social networking services. The judge said in its 53-page opinion, while allowing authorities the opportunity to refile the case. The FTC alleges that Facebook was abusing its power to eliminate its smaller competitors. Still, the judge ruled that this defect could conceivably be overcome by repleading the case, allowing the federal agency the possibility of refiling the action.
In other news, Japan's SoftBank has suspended production of its humanoid robot Pepper. A company spokeswoman said 7 years after the conglomerate unveiled the signature chatty white android to much fanfare. Pepper robots are used to greet people in stores and hotels in Japan and around the world have become a symbol of SoftBank's strategy of pouring resources into new technology, including artificial intelligence. The pint-sized robot, which costs 198,000 yen plus rental fees, has also recently been used to ease the loneliness of coronavirus quarantine in Japanese hotels for patients with mild symptoms. But on Tuesday, a spokeswoman for the firm's robotics unit told AFP it was halting output owing to an inventory pileup. When Pepper was released in 2014, it was billed as a new species of robot capable of recognizing basic emotions such as happiness and sadness by looking at people's faces, while SoftBank founder Masayoshi Son hailed it as a symbol of the firm's determination to lead in artificial intelligence. The spokeswoman said the company was in discussions on potential job reductions with its European robotics unit, which is headquartered in Paris and employs about 330 people.
And Japanese art collective Team Lab unveiled its new garden area exhibit at one of its digital art museums in Tokyo. One of the new sections, Floating Flower Gardens, is filled with 13,000 orchid flowers, which move up and down to create a space so that a visitor can be completely surrounded by flowers. Take a look. The installation by Team Lab invites exhibition viewers to experience Floating Flower Garden as a place of both interaction and tranquility, developed in a thick abundance of delicate pink petals and lush greenery. As entrance to the expanse move closer to the flower-filled space, the colorful blossoms most near to the viewer rise upwards slowly all at once, creating a hemispherical space surrounding them. Now, this ephemeral void is constantly evolving and changing position with each movement within the exhibition. And if many people move closer to one another, the dome spaces link up to form one single massive cavity.
Gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous.
Yes.
I want to see that in person. Really beautiful.
And before we go, I'd like to greet my son, my eldest baby.
Yeah.
My eldest baby. Happy birthday, Daniel.
Happy birthday.
God bless.
Well, that's it for tonight's broadcast. Thank you so much for joining us. I am CJ Hero. We'll see you again tomorrow.
And at the end of the day, there remains so much more to be grateful for. We'll see you back tomorrow. I'm Alma Angeles, and
we live in interesting
times.
times.
This program is supported by Bank of Commerce, an affiliate of San Miguel Corporation. We think customers.